New Orleans Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas has a chip on his shoulder that's bigger than ever, and he's not about to hide it. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day, to all you everydayers out there. Don't forget, you can always subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss the latest episodes. And if you want to keep the conversation going one-on-one with me, get early notes, insider information, exclusive film studies, and Q&As, make sure you head over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints today to join a community that I would love for you to be a part of. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on your favorite social media, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media, senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network, Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation site covering the New Orleans Saints. You can also find me every Tuesday on Locked On NFL and here with you every single Monday through Friday and then some on Locked On Saints. On today's episode of Locked On Saints, our two-a-days roll along, getting you all caught up, looking back at training camp day 6 ahead to training camp day 7, both of which padded practices. We're going to take a look at our rookie watch, including Bresee, who's got the moves. First round pick Bryan Bresee looking pretty good on Tuesday. We'll also take a look at James Hurst, the veteran offensive lineman. Could he be pushing to potentially start at left guard? But first, Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas, big number 13, making his sort of return to form, take 2, here in the 2023 season that got cut short in 2022. His initial return after just 3 games, or two games and some, and then he got injured during that Carolina Panthers game. But today, or rather, as you're listening to this or watching this yesterday, on Tuesday, we met with Michael Thomas as he came up for a media availability, a huge scrum around him. A lot of folks wanted to pepper in and get some questions. And I think that was very, very clear when it came to Michael Thomas is his motivation. And this is something we've always known about Michael Thomas. He's very driven. It's hard to keep him off the field when he's kind of got this ramp up process, all those other things. But it's very clear his drive and his motivation to get well, be ready, get going, and be able to go out there and make an impact on the field. No one wants to be out on the field more than Michael Thomas, and nobody wants to see Michael Thomas out on the field more than Michael Thomas himself. We've already seen some good moments from him. Some diving catches where he's putting his body on the line, hitting the ground, getting back up, making his way back. We're watching him plant his foot in the ground, turn immediately upfield, a little bit of comfort there. But we're watching every now and then something that maybe kind of insinuates like, the confidence isn't fully there, but more times than not, it is. And that, I think, maybe is the difference between being 99% and 100%, which that 1% makes a big difference for an NFL player, or really any athlete at all. It's what I always say about Sean Payton. I know Sean Payton's not an athlete, but you know Sean Payton is very calculated with the things that he does, including calling out Nathaniel Hackett, the Denver Broncos, the coaching staff, all that other stuff, which, by the way, was 100% deserved. They were atrocious last year, and any insinuation otherwise is just ridiculous. But one of the things you know about Sean Payton is that he doesn't do anything unless he's 100% sure he wants to do it. 99% unsure is 99% sure is 100% unsure. You can say the same thing about LeBron James. Everything is very calculated, put together, and intentional. And I think you want to see that same thing from Michael Thomas. Now, Michael Thomas spoke with us today, and he did say that he's got a chip on his shoulder, and that chip is getting bigger and bigger every single day. He's ready to go out there, prove everybody wrong, all these other things. Also said that, look, I don't really know what 100% is, but all I know is that I'm just trying to get better and better every day, going day by day. And I know that's kind of a sports cliche, right? Yeah, we're just taking it day by day, game by game, whatever it might be. But when you look at what it is that Michael Thomas is being asked to do, which is kind of this ramp up period and getting well, getting healthy before getting back out on the field, it really is a day-to-day thing. You'll see maybe some days where he's participating a little bit less. Some days he's participating a little bit more. We saw a very high participation level day for him yesterday, a little bit of a lower participation level day, or rather on Monday, and then a little bit of a lower participation day level of participation on Tuesday. And so, just depending upon the day, you're seeing all those things kind of fluctuate. And that's just part of the ramp up process, part of the way that the Saints are kind of going about all that. But the thing that about Michael Thomas is that he's got, an 80% contested catch rate last year. He's a dominant force in the red zone, somebody that you can always target. And those are places where the New Orleans Saints wanted to get better this year. And so far, what we're seeing is that he's making those contested catches. We haven't seen red zone drills or any red zone drills yet, but you have to imagine Michael Thomas is going to be a big part of those, along with Jimmy Graham, along with Jamal Williams and Alvin Kamara and Juwan Johnson and Taysom Hill. I mean, they have so many red zone weapons all of a sudden. But you have to imagine Michael Thomas will be kind of the highlight of that. The only time that Michael Thomas has really shown you any trouble so far is because Marshawn Lattimore is playing lights out. Marshawn Lattimore might be the best player in camp right now. And eventually, MT is going to get his against Marshawn Lattimore too. And so it's going to be iron sharpens iron. It's what Michael Thomas called good versus good today. And I would dare say great versus great because that's really who these guys are. And certainly Marshawn Lattimore is playing great. And Michael Thomas is building his way back to greatness. And we spoke with Carl Granderson not long ago about what it takes to take that leap from good to great. And he talked about the details. Every little bit counts. Every little bit matters. Everybody's got to do their job, all those other things. Michael Thomas is in the same boat. All of the details. Every little bit matters. Everybody around him has to do their job, and he's got to do his job. And so part of those details are also managing his return to the field in a way that is conducive to his ability to be able to ensure that he can impact and have longevity. That becomes the big goal for Michael Thomas. So Michael Thomas, we've already watched over the course of a couple of months, go from running 15-yard routes by lining up 10 yards downfield from the quarterback and effectively just running a 5-yard route to running deep routes, to crossing the field, to planting his foot and cutting, to planting his foot and getting sort of that one cut north and southness that he has that allows him to pick up yardage. He's healthy. He has no hardware. He has no limp. He has no brace, no cast, nothing like that. He just looks good. And I think that's what you want to see from him. And eventually you'll see him go from good to great. And at that point, that's when that Michael Thomas chip on his shoulder becomes even bigger than it already is. And that would be good news for the New Orleans Saints. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at James Hurst, the veteran offensive lineman who a lot of folks in the New Orleans Saints organization believe is a starting talent. Could that starting talent be pushing for a starting role here in New Orleans? We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This is the perfect time, if you've never used FanDuel before, to take your first swing at MLB odds by heading over to FanDuel today. Because if you're a first-time customer, you're going to get 10 times your entry back of your first deposit amount up to $200. So if you put $20 down, you're going to get $200 back in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 in bonus bets that you can use for money line, over unders, who's going to hit the first home run, whatever you want. It's all going to be there, all on an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use, and that pays you out instantly when you win. There's no better place for betting on MLB odds than America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. You can get started today by heading over to FanDuel.com/locked-on. It's going to get you up to $200 as a new customer in bonus bets. Once again, that is FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again to all the everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Hey, real quick, let me tell you about Subtext. It is free to join, 14 days free, $4.99 a month. If you want to stick around after that, join subtext.com/LockedOnSaints. Early notes when it comes to camp, well before we're able to do the live shows. A lot of insider information that I'm sending through there as well. We've got film studies, Q&As, much more. And of course, you can send me questions anytime and get all that information straight to your phone. So if you want to check us out, join subtext.com/LockedOnSaints. It's a really great way, especially going through training camp, to make sure you're getting all the information most immediate way possible. All right, so let's take a look at the New Orleans Saints offensive line, James Hurst right now, I think, is pushing potentially for a starting role at left guard. And I'm not just saying that because Andrus Peat is hurt. I mean that from beforehand too. James Hurst has been taking a considerable amount of snaps at left guard. I think a lot of that has to do with the Andrus Peat ramp up, because not only is he hurt right now, but he was also returning from injury from last year, remember, as he was working his way back over the course of the offseason. So I do think a little bit of the in and outness of Andrus Peat in the lineup has had to do with the fact that he has been coming back from that injury. But it has been curious to me that James Hurst has been getting the first snaps oftentimes at left guard instead of Andrus Peat. I understand the idea of taking Andrus Peat off the field every now and then so you're not overworking him, but why not give him the first couple of reps as opposed to the third and fourth reps with Derek Carr and making sure that he's in there with the starting offensive line? Because what's happening right now is you're seeing, as the Saints open up first team drills, Trevor Penning at left tackle, James Hurst at left guard. Then you've got Erik McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, and Ryan Ramczyk when he's participating all along your starting lineup. But by the time that Andrus Peat has been coming in, Trevor Penning's no longer out there. James Hurst bounces out to left tackle. Storm Norton comes in at right tackle in place of Ryan Ramczyk. So why not give Andrus Peat the reps next to Trevor Penning and then along with Erik McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, and Ryan Ramczyk? That's not to say that he didn't get any of those reps, but he hasn't gotten them, it feels like, as much as, at least as my notes show, and as I remember from watching training camp, as much as James Hurst has been getting. And now Andrus Peat is dealing with that quad strain. He's, I would guess, day to day when it comes to that. They expect that he was, going to be back pretty quickly with that. Doesn't seem like it was going to be a big deal, especially with it just being a strain, as opposed to what we saw at Trey Turner, which was a torn quadriceps muscle, which is an entirely different injury. That is a season-ending injury. He's now on injured reserve. And so with Trey Turner on injured reserve, Andrus Peat off on the sideline right now, James Hurst is just living it up. And the thing about it is that I would say that I would grade James Hurst's reps better than I would grade Andrus Peat's reps so far over the course of training camp. Now, notwithstanding, of course, him coming back from injury and coming back from all that, I get it. James Hurst is healthy while Andrus Peat is still ramping up. So maybe that's why I would grade, and maybe that's why James Hurst has looked better in my mind than what we've seen from Andrus Peat. But I mean, some of it is just watching it all as it unfolds. So what if James Hurst is actually the better starter while Andrus Peat becomes the better depth player? Is there a reality in that? And I do think that there is a reality in that, because just like James Hurst, Andrus Peat can play left tackle and left guard. He could probably play right guard for you if you needed him to. You've also got a good backup there in terms of a guy like Nick Saldiveri, who we'll talk about here in just a moment. In Rookie Watch, I saw with some pretty outstanding blocks in the running game on Tuesday. So it's interesting to watch. And I don't think that it's something that I'm imagining. I do think that it's something to really pay close attention to, because there's a chance that Trevor Penning and James Hurst, the starters on the left side going into week one, not just because Andrus Peat might be, still dealing with an injury or something like that, but because James Hurst might actually earn that opportunity. And I think that that's worth entertaining and that's worth considering. The New Orleans Saints don't have to be married to Andrus Peat on this new contract. They just simply don't. James Hurst, though, is somebody that has already shown you that you can trust them. And the New Orleans Saints organization, from Dennis Allen to Doug Marrone to everybody over on that offensive side, to Pete Carmichael, they all believe that James Hurst is a starter somewhere else in the NFL. So if they believe that, then they probably believe that he's a starter in their system too. So it's going to be really interesting as training camp rolls along, just how much of James Hurst, big number 74, do we see in 75 spot, lining up next to Trevor Penning as opposed to in place of Trevor Penning. I wouldn't be mad at this. I'm going to be honest. Because one thing that James Hurst is at least showing you is that he's been reliable. And I don't just mean reliable as a blocker, I mean healthy. He's someone that's been on the field for you, that's been able to be out there. Andrus Peat has had trouble with that. And now we're seeing it again here with the quad strain. Another soft tissue injury, by the way. Not great. So it is interesting to watch. And I'm really, really, really intrigued to see where this goes. Because I do think that if James Hurst wins that role and shows you that he deserves that role, then he should have that role. And I think you would feel pretty good about that going into the 2023 season. with James Hurst at left guard, especially if Trevor Penning continues to play well at left tackle. And so far, we've seen Trevor Penning lose a little bit, right? We've seen him kind of, still taking some steps and all, but I'm not too worried about him. I'd be a little bit more worried about Andrus Peat, if I'm being completely honest. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens there. One thing that I want to add on to this, that's not relative to Andrus Peat, but that is relative to you as Saints fans. The New Orleans Saints are making some changes to their training camp schedule, particularly in open practices. So the gates will still open, or the revised training camp schedule will now have the gates open if you're visiting training camp, which the only 4 open practices that remain are August 4th, 5th, and 6th. So that's this coming Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then next Thursday, August 10th. Those are the only open practices remaining. Those of you that are that have the suite tickets, and we're looking at August 2nd to be able to go, today to be able to go, that's now delayed until August 9th. So for Wednesday, August 9th. So that's the folks that were in the private club and suite holder practice schedules. That's what that one was. But otherwise, what's going to happen basically is that the Saints are going to do their stretch individuals and other things in the indoor facility and then go outside at 10 a.m. So they're going to be coming outside a little bit later. So you're not going to see them go through stretch or individual drills, but you will still see on the outside them do things like team drills and field goal and special team drills and stuff like that. So you'll still get to see some 11-on-11s and everything, but they're going to go out there a little bit later. Basically, what's happening is that with the heat advisory, as it is right now, the New Orleans Saints are kind of scaling back how long they're going to be outside. So instead of being outside for effectively 2 hours, it will just be 1 hour from about 10 to 11. And so that's why they're making this adjustment. So just a heads up for you, if you're planning on coming to any of those practices, 4th, 5th, 6th, or the 10th, just be aware that the schedule's a little bit different. Gates open at 9:15. Players will start inside, but then move outside at 10. So you probably won't see players outside until about 10 a.m. And then they'll go through team drills and stuff like that. So you still get to see a lot of action. You'll just have to wait until you initially see them. That's really all that it is. All right, coming up next, let's take a look at Rookie Watch. Bryan Bresee, in particular, keenly in focus for me today. And let me tell you, that guy has some moves. So we got that coming up for you as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with Rookie Watch. Getting you updated on all of the drafted rookies for the New Orleans Saints. Who stood out? Who are we still waiting to see things from? All that. I want to start off with the guys that stood out. So let's start with Bryan Bresee. Bryan Bresee, Eric McCoy had a lot of praise for him today on Tuesday during his presser. You can find that on the New Orleans Saints website. I need to start sharing some of the press conference footage that I have. I'm just trying to get you stuff as quickly as possible, and that stuff takes time. And so I'd rather just get you the information that you want than to gussy it up. Not too worried about that. I just want you to have what you're looking for. But I do need to share some of that stuff with you. But Eric McCoy, basically, I got the opportunity to talk to him and kind of go back and forth with him during media availability. He was available to everybody. But I got to pepper him with a couple questions around Bryan Bresee. What surprises you about him? What impresses you about him? And he mentioned his athleticism, he mentioned his moveset, and he mentioned his ability to string moves together. All of those things should be music to your ears, okay? When you're thinking about Bryan Bresee as a pass rusher and being kind of a more subtle, twitchy guy on the interior, something Dennis Allen just on Monday said was kind of relatively new to this New Orleans Saints defensive line, where they've always kind of had the power guys. This is the first time they've really had one of the finesse guys in the middle. Although Sheldon Rankins had a little bit of that spice to his game for sure. Bryan Bresee is just a different mold. He's just a different mold. And so I kind of keened in, watched him today, and he really does. I mean, his burst off the line of scrimmage, how quickly he gets off the ball, his quickness, his subtle quickness, the way that he sells in kind of two gaps, the way that he sells, he's going one way, but then leverages back towards the inside. I mean, he does a really good job of kind of setting up these offensive linemen to do what it is that he wants them to do before he does what he wants to do about that. And so that's just a little bit of, that's kind of veteran in a way, right? That experience of being able to kind of manipulate the guy that's in front of you, make them do what you want to do so that you can do the thing that you want to do. And so if I want to be able to cut inside, I need to get you to buy my outside rush first. So I need you to get to commit to your outside shoulder, and then maybe try to get you to go high so that I can come in low and take advantage of the leverage and be able to do all that, and then do it with a bunch of fancy pass rush moves that I don't know, but that Bryan Bresee absolutely has. and his ability to be able to string together some of those moves is something that we haven't necessarily seen yet from Isaiah Foskey, but also understand that Isaiah Foskey is learning an entirely new position right now. It's not just edge rusher that he's playing. He's playing a 4-eye, which is very different than what he's accustomed to. It's where he's been a 2, and I'll explain what a 4-eye is here in a moment. But, Isaiah Foskey has kind of been this guy that has, throughout his time at Notre Dame, been a 2-point stance rusher from the outside who can win with speed or get a running start to transition that speed to power and be able to kind of bulldoze some of the guys in front of him. You got to be able to be lined up outside the tackle there. He's been playing a lot of 4-eye, so he's been lined up over the inside shoulder of the tackle. So he's been in a really, really different sort of formation. He's being used right now and trained right now, kind of similarly to the way that Cam Jordan was being used his rookie year. So while you're watching Isaiah Foskey learn an entirely new position, and he showed a little bit on Tuesday in the run game in particular, and his ability to be able to kind of clog up some of those spaces, be able to kind of leverage and climb the line of scrimmage laterally to get involved in those run stops. Those are all good things. But what you're seeing from Bryan Bresee is a polished pass rush plan that he's bringing with him to the next level. We watched him climb up a little bit. We saw some first team reps, seeing more and more first team reps for Bryan Bresee. So that's all good news for him. I think he's developing, he's taking the steps, he's hitting the benchmarks, he's doing the things that you want to see him do right now, outside of just being an absolute wrecking machine, the way that Nathan Shepard, for instance, has been early on, or at least was during camp. But as we've discussed before, usually the way that training camp happens is that when training camp starts, there's a big gap between the veterans who are more comfortable, who have done this 5, 6, 7, 12 times in their careers, and then the rookies who are doing it for the very first time. And then as the rookies start to get acclimated, the gap starts to close a little bit. And you're starting to see that for Bryan Bresee. I think eventually you'll see that for Isaiah Foskey as well. Jake Haener continues to stand out. It's so great to have a third quarterback on your roster that can make all of these throws, and that does it in a way that is such a tight throwing motion. It's really precise. He puts a lot of spit on the ball, all that kind of stuff. You want to see that. You're seeing it from Jake Haener. I don't need to continuously wax philosophical about the guy, but there is value in how good he's playing right now. And the value goes beyond just Jake Haener. It goes to the guys that he's throwing to as well. First, second, third team guys, because everybody's playing everywhere. So you got to be able to really share the wealth. And I think Jake Haener's doing a good job of that. So those are 3 guys that are really big standouts so far. A.T. Perry notched himself another catch, one that I would call contested. Isaac Yiadom, a guy that was, that has ripped passes out of Rashid Shaheed's hands, who's fought guys that are much bigger than him and won over the course of training camp. A.T. Perry getting a catch on him. So we're watching the catches stack up, right? We saw 3 catches a few days ago, including the 7-on-7s with Derek Carr, where he kind of readjusted his route on the fly and hit him on the sideline. The contested catch and the big win, I believe it was also against Isaac Yiadom, actually, during one-on-ones. And then today, another nice catch, or Tuesday, another nice catch as well. I think he's stacking up days. I'm not going to say he's jumping off the field yet, but you're seeing it all kind of start to fit in. And I'll say the same thing for Nick Saldiveri, who's next on my list of guys that aren't necessarily standing out, but you're seeing the progress that you want to see. I saw a lot of nice things from Nick Saldiveri on Tuesday, moving up into the second team, especially with Andrus Peat and Trey Turner unavailable for the team. Trey Turner, of course, on injured reserve. Andrus Peat, as we discussed just a moment ago, dealing with that quad strain. Nick Saldiveri, the 4th round selection, pick 103 overall, the very first selection of day 3. The guy the Saints said, we can't miss on him. We have to go get him. He was out there today in second team reps and doing a great job. I thought that you saw some really, really good stuff for him. I'm fairly certain he got some snaps with Derek Carr as well during first team drills. So you're watching him climb. And some of that's assisted by the sort of vacancy at the position, or vacancies at the position. But hey, when you get those opportunities, you don't sit back and say, well, I'm only here because guys are hurt. You get there and you say, all right, I got to make this happen. And you go out there and make it happen. And I thought that he looked particularly good in the run game. Really forceful, bringing some guys down to the ground. He had a really nice block on Prince Emili at one point that brought him down to the ground. He continues to fight. He continues to push. He's not playing through the echoes and echoes and echoes of the whistle or anything like that. You know, I got to be worried about none of that. But he's showing you some of the things that he can do just as a big, strong dude that's ready to win on the offensive line. And that's a really good showing for him. A couple of guys, or really the last remaining guy that I really just want to see a little bit more from. Oh, I didn't mention Kendre Miller. Sorry, but Kendre continuing to show you some good things, runs very strong, getting involved in the passing game, all that. nothing big, massively different around Kendre Miller today than there was yesterday. So yesterday's episode, I kind of broke down a little bit of what it is that he does. But the long and short of it is that the guy can do anything you want him to do. You want to run between the tackles? Sure. You want him to bounce off a contact? Sure. You want him to beat a guy around the edge? Sure. You want him to catch passes? Okay. Like, he's starting to do all those things. And I think the one thing that Dennis Allen said that he wants to see from him, actually, that I asked him about on Tuesday, is just a little bit more subtleness in the route running. So maybe a little bit more sell to the outside before cutting to the inside. Maybe, a little bit, maybe they're looking for, better change in direction or dropping the hips so that he can control his center of gravity when he changes direction, selling the routes, things like that. So maybe it's some of those things that you want to see. But outside of that, like, those are things that he'll continue to develop over the course of training camp. The one guy that I'd like to see something a little bit more from is Jordan Howden. Jordan Howden, I watched specifically during one play, and it happened to be a play where he gives up a big catch and run to Keith Kirkwood. And I won't say he gave it up entirely all by himself. He was kind of stacked over the corner in the slot, and Keith Kirkwood was coming from the right side of the field, breaking out towards over the middle of the field towards the left, kind of an over route in a way. And look, Jordan Howden was staring right down the barrel at it and saw it developing in front of him, but just didn't react quickly enough. And I don't think it was a processing thing. And this is why I have a lot of confidence in Jordan Howden, because we know that the field vision is there. I think it was a trust thing. I think it was just him not trusting his instincts immediately in seeing that route develop over the middle of the field, and then hesitating just that little microsecond of, should I go there? But what happens if I leave this area of the field? That was enough to give the quarterback time to say, I'm comfortable taking that and hitting that route over the middle and being able to get a big catch and run out of that. Keith Kirkwood, a really nice way to play that route, did a great job with it with the ball in his hands afterwards too. And so really, like, again, I don't think that Jordan Howden didn't see it developing. In fact, I know he saw it developing. And I don't think it was a processing thing of like, is what's happening what I think it's happening? I think it was literally just trusting himself. And so it's just got to be about, hey, even at this level, the game's moving faster, the people are bigger, the people are faster, the game's a little bit different, but you can still trust your instincts in the NFL. And that's one of the things that's kind of like a mental leap that he's just going to have to take. And it'll come with experience. It'll come with reps. So I'm not super worried about Jordan Howden right now, but that will be something I'll be specifically watching for. And the moment that he does that, that's where you go, there he is. That's the guy that the New Orleans Saints were hoping for and looking for when they drafted. That's the guy that they wanted to be able to unlock. And look, he's got Dennis Allen. He's got Marcus Robertson. He's got Joe Woods. He's got Tyrann Mathieu and Marshawn Lattimore and Paul Sadivo and Alontae Taylor, Marcus May. I mean, the guy has the people around him that will help him trust himself when he sees those moments. And the second that he does, second that he learns to trust himself and trust his instincts, that could be an interception, or at least taking that pass away, as opposed to that being a big catch and run. And that's the tricky part of the safety position, right? It's either the big catch and run or nothing happens. And that's just the conundrum of playing safety. But you'd rather nothing happen. And I think Jordan Howden's this close to that being nothing happens, as opposed to the big catch and run by Keith Kirkwood. All right, y'all. Later on today, getting you everything that you need to know about training camp day 7, which will be the third day in a row in pads, sure to still be physical. So we'll be breaking that down live later on. And then we'll have a Thursday morning episode for you, but no practice for the New Orleans Saints on Thursday. So no live show Thursday afternoon, but then we're back to 2-a-days on Friday. Appreciate you as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. To all the everydayers out there, love you. Appreciate you very much for being here. And I thank you, as always, making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.